Welcome to Silent Screams, where we unravel tales of the uncanny and the unexplainable. Tonight, we delve into the eerie world of YouTubers, creators who found themselves in situations far beyond their control, where the line between reality and the supernatural began to blur. As the cameras rolled, what started as routine recordings turned into nightmares they could never forget. Sit back, dim the lights, and prepare for a chilling experience. Let's begin. Mark had always prided himself on his creativity. His YouTube channel, dedicated to urban exploration, had gained a loyal following. Old buildings, forgotten tunnels, and abandoned warehouses were his canvas, and his camera captured it all. This time, he had chosen an old theater, one that had been closed for decades. Rumors swirled about the place, phantom applause, the sound of a piano playing itself, and shadows moving in the balconies long after the building had been declared empty. He arrived just before dusk, the fading light casting long shadows across the cracked facade of the building. As he pushed open the heavy double doors, the smell of damp wood and dust filled his nose. His flashlight flickered briefly, a small inconvenience he brushed off his bad batteries. The camera rolled, capturing every detail of the decayed grandeur. Peeling wallpaper, shattered chandeliers, and rows of moth-eaten seats gave the place a haunting beauty. Mark began narrating his exploration, his voice steady despite the oppressive silence. But as he moved deeper into the theater, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The hair on the back of his neck prickled, and his footsteps echoed unnaturally, as if something or someone was following him. He turned the camera to face the balcony, its ornate railings still intact despite the years. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, a faint shadow darting between the seats. He called out, his voice trembling slightly. No response. Just the creak of old wood settling. In the darkness, shrugging it off, Mark pressed on, finding his way to the stage. The spotlight he set up cast an eerie glow over the empty seats. It was then he noticed the piano. It sat at the edge of the stage, covered in dust, its keys yellowed with age. He approached it cautiously, his camera focused on the instrument. That's when he heard it, a single, soft note that seemed to echo endlessly. He froze, his breath caught in his throat. No one was there. The room was empty. Miles away, another YouTuber, Emily, was preparing for a live stream in her cozy apartment. Her channel was a mix of gaming and storytelling, her bubbly personality drawing in thousands of viewers each week. Tonight, she planned to read horror stories submitted by her fans. She adjusted her ring light, ensuring her face was perfectly lit, and started the stream. The chat buzzed with excitement as she greeted her audience, her smile bright and warm. The stories began innocently enough, tales of eerie coincidences and childhood fears. But as the night wore on, something began to feel off. The lights in her apartment flickered, and the stream lagged intermittently, causing her viewers to comment about the strange glitches. She laughed it off, blaming her old Wi-Fi router. But then, as she read a particularly chilling story about a haunted mirror, a loud crash echoed from her kitchen. Emily jumped, her heart racing. "Hold on, guys," she said, forcing a nervous laugh as she set the camera down. She walked cautiously toward the noise, her chat exploding with questions and jokes about ghosts. When she reached the kitchen, she found nothing out of place, no broken dishes, no toppled chairs. Everything was as she'd left it. Shaking her head, she returned to her desk. But as she sat down, she noticed something on her screen. In the reflection of the glass cabinet behind her, a shadowy figure stood, watching her. She spun around, but the room was empty. Her heart pounded as she tried to laugh it off, but her voice trembled. The chat was in chaos, some viewers insisting they'd seen it too, while others accused her of staging the event for views. Emily ended the stream abruptly, her hands shaking as she turned off the camera. In another part of the country, Daniel, a tech vlogger, was setting up his latest unboxing video. The item was nothing unusual, a high-end drone sent to him by a sponsor. His studio was meticulously organized, every detail designed to showcase the products he reviewed. As he unboxed the drone, he noticed something strange. A small, folded piece of paper was tucked inside the packaging, something that wasn't part of the usual product materials. He unfolded it to find a single word scrawled in shaky handwriting: "Leave." Daniel frowned, holding the note up to the camera. "Looks like someone's idea of a joke," he said, forcing a chuckle. But the note unsettled him, and he couldn't quite shake the feeling of unease it brought. He set it aside and continued filming, demonstrating the drone's features before taking it outside for a test flight. The drone soared smoothly into the night sky, its LED lights blinking against the darkness. Daniel narrated the flight, his voice calm and professional, but then the drone's camera feed cut out. He brought the drone back, his annoyance clear as he reset the controls. But when the feed returned, he froze. The screen showed the drone hovering over his backyard, but something was wrong. In the center of the yard stood a figure, its face obscured, its body unnaturally still. Daniel turned to look outside, but the yard was empty. He glanced back at the screen. Still, the figure stood there. The stories of Mark, Emily, and Daniel were only the beginning of their encounters with the unknown. As the nights wore on, their lives became entwined with the inexplicable, the line between the digital world and the supernatural blurring in ways they could never have imagined. The cameras that once brought them fame now seemed to draw something else, something darker. The unsettling events would escalate, each of them discovering that some horrors cannot be captured, only endured. Mark stared at the piano, his heart hammering in his chest. The single note seemed to reverberate far longer than it should have, as if the sound itself were alive, lingering in the stale air of the abandoned theater. He backed away slowly, his camera trembling in his hands. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to run, but the rational part of his mind demanded an explanation. Maybe it was a loose string, a shift in the old wood caused by his footsteps. That had to be it. He approached the piano cautiously, lifting the camera to capture the keys. The dust that blanketed the instrument was undisturbed, no fingerprints, no sign that anyone had touched it. As he leaned closer, a cold draft brushed the back of his neck. He spun around, his flashlight sweeping the stage and the empty seats beyond. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the aisles, and for a moment, Mark thought he saw something moving in the upper balcony. His breath caught in his throat, but the figure, if it was ever there, had vanished. Then, he heard it again. A note, louder this time, resonating from the piano behind him. Mark whipped around, his camera aimed directly at the keys. They were still. But as he stood frozen, another note played, and then another, forming a slow, haunting melody. His flashlight flickered, and in its brief strobe, he saw a pair of pale hands moving across the keys, though no body was attached to them. Mark stumbled back, nearly dropping his camera. The music stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence that pressed down on him like a weight. He didn't wait to see what would happen next. Sprinting off the stage, he made his way toward the exit, his breath ragged and his heart pounding. But as he reached the lobby, the double doors he had entered through were now chained shut. The heavy links glinted in the faint light, and a padlock dangled from the middle. He turned, scanning the dim space for another way out. The faint sound of footsteps echoed behind him, slow, deliberate, impossibly heavy. Mark aimed his flashlight toward the sound, but the beam barely pierced the darkness. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and indistinct, its features shrouded in black. It didn't walk, it glided closer, its head tilting as if studying him. Mark backed away until his shoulder hit the wall, his breath coming in short gasps. Emily couldn't sleep. After ending her stream, she had unplugged her camera and triple-checked every lock in her apartment. But the unease lingered. The shadow she had seen, no, the reflection, kept replaying in her mind. It couldn't have been real. She had to be tired, her eyes playing tricks on her after staring at the screen for hours. But the chat, those frantic messages from her viewers, said otherwise. She lay in bed, the room bathed in the soft glow of her bedside lamp. The silence felt oppressive, thick, as if it were waiting for something to happen. Every creak of the apartment, every gust of wind against the window, made her flinch. She picked up her phone, scrolling through social media to distract herself. But then she saw it, an image posted by one of her viewers. A screenshot from the stream, showing the shadowy figure in perfect clarity. Its face was obscured, but its posture, its presence, radiated malice. Emily's stomach turned. She turned the phone off and buried her face in her hands. Maybe she should stay with a friend tonight. But as she sat in the quiet of her room, she felt it again, that same prickling sensation she'd felt during the stream. Someone, or something, was watching her. Slowly, she turned her head toward the closet. The door was ajar, though she distinctly remembered closing it before going to bed. Her pulse quickened as she stared into the dark gap. She grabbed her phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the space. Her clothes hung motionless, the floor cluttered with shoes and boxes. But as she leaned closer, she noticed something that hadn't been there before. Scrawled on the inside of the closet door, in faint, jagged letters, were the words, "I see you." Emily bolted from her bed, her hands trembling as she fumbled with the locks on her front door. She didn't care where she went, anywhere was better than here. As she stepped into the hallway, she thought she heard a faint laugh coming from her apartment. She didn't look back. Daniel sat in his editing room, replaying the drone footage for the 10th time. The figure in the yard, it had to be a glitch. Maybe a trick of the light, or an artifact in the video. But no matter how many times he adjusted the contrast or zoomed in, the figure remained disturbingly clear. Its posture was unnatural, its limbs slightly elongated, and its head was tilted at an angle that made Daniel's skin crawl. He had tried to brush it off earlier, but the sense of dread had only grown. Now, as he stared at the screen, he noticed something he hadn't before. The figure wasn't just standing in the yard, it was looking at the drone. Its face, though blurry, was angled upward, its eyeless sockets fixed directly on the camera. Daniel pushed his chair back from the desk, his heart racing. A soft tapping sound echoed through the room, rhythmic and deliberate. He froze, straining to locate the source. It seemed to be coming from the window behind him. Slowly, he turned, the hairs on his arms standing on end. The blinds were closed, but the tapping continued, more insistent now. Summoning his courage, Daniel reached for the blinds and yanked them open. The yard outside was empty, bathed in the faint glow of his porch light. But as he stared out into the night, he noticed something on the glass. A handprint, smeared and distorted, as if someone had dragged their fingers across the window from the outside. He stumbled back, his chest tight with panic. His phone buzzed on the desk, and he grabbed it, desperate for a distraction. The notification was from an unknown number. The message read, "Did you like what you saw?" Daniel dropped the phone, his hands trembling. The tapping started again, this time from the door to his editing room. For Mark, Emily, and Daniel, the nights were only growing darker. The entities that had crossed into their lives seemed to thrive on their fear, each encounter more terrifying than the last. They began to question the very fabric of their reality, wondering if the cameras they once used to document their lives had become windows to something far more sinister.